Banner of the Maid is a strategy RPG by Azure Flame Studio, taking place in an alternate history French Revolution. I had seen this game pop up in store and some videos, but didn't really know much about it, other than the very bust forwardness of its characters. But it's a strategy RPG that had some similarities to Fire Emblem and promised character development, deep story, and engaging combat. So naturally, I had to give it a go. Starting with the visuals, the game looks pretty great. The theme is rock solid here, playing into that Victorian era colonial period. The character work is fan service forward, but it never felt like it crossed that invisible but well-known line into something else. Obviously, the 2D character models had a lot of work done. They're beautifully drawn and have a fantastic sense of style and character. Each time a new person shows up, you can get a distinct and strong impression of who they are. The portraits move slightly in the visual novel-like segments, altering facial expressions to show the emotion of the dialogue. They are really good quality. On the other side of those 2D models were the pixel art sprites, and I particularly enjoyed the sprite work. Azure Flame did a really nice job differentiating the characters in their pixelated forms. They looked awesome, each unit distinct from the others. Movement looks good too, as the units cross the tiles or move into an attack animation. All of it was very well done. Banner of the Maid boasts a solid variety in different maps and locations, from small town streets making tight quarters a way of surviving a much larger force, to large fields with nowhere to hide, making movement and maybe baiting the enemy your only tactic if you don't want to lose all your units. This variety gives a nice change of pace from one battle to the other, and for the most part, they all look and feel pretty great. The out of battle map was super lame though. Picking from single town badges with no movement or animation of your character, just a click to see the same person in front of a static, boring background for each node that said the same thing and sold the same stuff. It was so uninteresting. While each node did have its own character, that character never moved or changed, and they very rarely changed their stock, so it felt pretty samey very often. I felt like they could have just done menus and been done with it. Other than that though, visuals were on point. Performance-wise, the game works great. It isn't a game that's going to push your hardware or anything. It runs great on Steam Deck too, no issues whatsoever. You don't have a lot of control options though, just changing the resolution pretty much. You can turn on and off combat animation at any time, which honestly was a godsend. It's not that the combat animation is bad or anything, it works just fine, but you'll spend a lot of time in battle. They can get really long, and I'm talking 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes even more per battle, which I don't necessarily mind. That's somewhat common fare for the strategy RPG genre, but turning off those animations can save a ton of time. So my personal preference is I usually have them on for a while at the start and then turn them off as I go. I turn them back on if I have a new unit and I want to see how they do it or something, but then I turn them back off again to help the fights move along quicker. Alright, moving on to the story. I was expecting an interesting narrative here, as that was the feeling I got from the plethora of people who enjoyed it, but unfortunately it did not hit for me. I found nothing in the story or characters to make me care about them or what was happening with them or to them. There is a bit of a mystery with these kind of Maid powers and how that needs to be kept somewhat secret, alluding to the idea that people will burn them at the stake as a witch. But that doesn't play to the game as much as you would hope, as you just kind of use those powers all the time on battle with zero repercussions. The dialogue between characters often was stale or just didn't make any sense. They will reference things that you haven't experienced or know anything about yet. They act as if things are a huge revelation, but no reasoning as to why it should be. It just all felt pretty blah to me. You can change the language, but that is only for the written dialogue. The spoken dialogue is all the same. I can't tell for sure, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's in Chinese. Maybe that's where Azure Flame is from. I'm not 100% sure on that. Voice acting is fine, but it definitely has a little bit of contrast with that and the French style. To the point that after the first 5 or 10 hours or so, I just skipped the dialogue because I didn't care anymore. Okay, well, this is a strategy RPG, so let's get to the meat here. Gameplay in Banner of the Maid is very similar to Fire Emblem. You have characters of 4 different styles or types, each type being strong against another one, weak against one, and there's one that sits kind of in the middle. The characters you control are commanders and fight with like a unit group, though other than the animation, that means absolutely nothing. You move all of your team around the map, kind of like a chess game board, cast what are essentially spells or skills, use items, or attack the enemy. Each unit has weapons and can be equipped with items or an armor or accessory. Pretty standard strategy RPG fare in that regard. What this game does well, though, is it offers numerous different win and lose conditions, making you have to really think about how you are going to play each scenario. However, that same aspect that I loved at times ultimately became something I despised, especially after the beginning few hours. At least on normal difficulty, the game decides quite often that your lose condition is to either lose the main character, lose 1 or 2 of your other units, not all of them, just 1 or 2, or if you have a guest character, if they die. So you'll have 3 to 4 conditions, all separate, that will make you fail. This may seem normal at first, and maybe even fair, except that you have units that are healers or these glass tanks. That isn't a build you decided, that's how the game creates them for you. And in order for them to level up, they have to be doing something. But if you get them even remotely within firing range, the enemy can always seem to attack from 4 or 5 different units and destroy them in a single turn. Not to mention that the game will not specify which enemy units can get a double attack. In this game, that happens quite often. If your speed is high enough, you will get a double attack on the same turn. So you could move on, take out an enemy, or maybe not quite be able to kill them, and then either they get their double shot or another guy comes up to attack and hits you twice and gone. Which again, I don't think is the biggest deal, except that when you pair that with the fail condition of losing 1 or 2 units at all, it becomes pretty frustrating. And while I don't think I'm the best strategy RPG player, I have played a lot of them and usually do pretty well. So when I found myself losing or failing quite often, it was a little frustrating. That said, when I lost, I rarely felt that it was because I made some terrible decision. Sometimes it was, and I'll own those for sure, but rather I just kept feeling like I was getting hit 8 times from an enemy unit that I was supposed to be strong against, or an enemy who had 18% chance to hit, and yet somehow they did hit and even landed a critical. I know that RNG plays a big role in games like this, but similar to XCOM, if you played that before, it often gave the feeling of my characters missing with a 99% chance to hit and dying from attack that had 5. And that's not to mention the several other times I lost because some dumb guest character who I have no control over runs straight into a mob of enemies and gets themselves killed. Boom, game over. So it forces you to rush all of your units in, being reckless to try and thin the herd before that character gets there. But you often will still have that lose condition of 1 or 2 of your characters dying. So you just try over and over and over until the RNG gods deem you worthy. So the game forces you into spots where the fail conditions are specifically designed to make you lose. Now, your characters don't go away forever like Fire Emblem. If they die, they just retreat from battle and they can be used in the next one. So why the fail conditions for losing one or two of those characters are in so many of these levels kind of baffles me. I found myself increasingly frustrated over this game at all the stupid ways I could get unlucky and lose, because they knock down 2 units and that's it, game over. Now, feel free to lambaste me with the get good or whatever, but I feel pretty competent in this style of game and constantly felt like I was getting shafted. To be fair, there were certainly times where the battle was more of a puzzle than I gave it credit for, and when I broke through to find the right combination and strategy, it would suddenly open up and was easy. That was really cool. I did enjoy that a lot. When you have a puzzle that you have to solve, that makes a lot of sense to me, but that doesn't work on all of them. The game even has specific puzzle maps where they give you a hard win condition, including this maximum number of moves, and you had to find just the right way to move through the map to beat that level. Those were really cool and can help open that idea to the player of the battles being more puzzle-like than you would have otherwise thought. But sometimes it's just the stupid RNG. Now, I don't want to fully leave it there, as there were some combat encounters that were incredibly fun and incorporated really interesting mechanics. Like there's this one mission where your main character is in a building, and as she talks to the people in the building, you can get a light to turn on outside. The better and quicker you did that, the easier it was for your strategy outside, because then you could actually see the enemy that was hiding in the dark and where they were coming from. I really loved some of the unique mechanics offered in this game and felt like there were ideas of the different win and fail conditions that were really good. Some of these interesting mechanics to go through the levels that made them different than other strategy games. But man, sometimes, don't get me wrong, I don't think Banner of the Maid is a bad game, but I think the balance is extremely out of whack. It has great ideas, like interesting skills that your characters are able to learn from, either level ups or buying them from one of those lame city nodes. But then those skills don't seem to do much in battles. The promotion idea is really cool, but it doesn't seem to do much for you. It takes a while to get there and you don't have much choice. It's just kind of the next step up. If this game has caught your interest, I would firstly wait for a sale, as it often goes on sale for under $5 US. And don't be afraid to bump down the difficulty if it's driving you nuts. The other option too is to be willing to grind and take the level slow, at least the ones that allow you to, as there are several that have speed requirements forcing you to do it in a certain number of rounds. And that kind of makes you be reckless. Don't have a lot of choice. Banner of the Maid has some incredible art with a solid take on the strategy RPG genre, but balancing issues and a subpar story that, while original, just couldn't stay the path for me. It ends up a bit of a bust for me. It's hard to give it a score, but honestly, it's a 6 out of 10 for me. Banner of the Maid has some pieces that are absolutely fantastic, but the snorefest that was the writing and the ridiculous RNG that can lead to stupid difficulty spikes make it hard to recommend. And that's it for me. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new around here, make sure you slap that subscribe. Let me know what you think. If you've played the game before, what are your thoughts? Thank you so much for watching, and good hunting.